And we're live. Hello and welcome to our special story time with Doyin Richards and Joe Cepeda. Today we will be presenting their children's book, Watch Me, A Story of Immigration and Inspiration, which is a picture book based on the true story of Doyin's father's journey to America. This event includes an audience Q&A, so please feel free to submit a question by using the Ask a Question button at the very bottom of the screen. You can also vote for any questions you find interesting, and they will make their way to the very top of the list. Also, if you would like to support our store by purchasing a copy of the book, just click on the green purchase button directly below the viewer's screen. It will take you to our website where you can complete your purchase. And our store is the oldest independent bookstore in Southern California. Vroman's is 126 years old, so we appreciate any support you can provide us at this time, whether it's purchasing a copy today or boosting us on social media. And with that said, let me introduce our speakers for today, and then we can get started. So Doyin Richards is the author of the popular parenting blog, Daddy Doin' Work, and the book, Daddy Doin' Work, Empowering Mothers to Evolve Fatherhood. He has appeared on nationally broadcast television shows, including The Today Show and Good Morning America. And joining him is award-winning illustrator Joe Cepeda, who has illustrated more than 30 books for children, including the book Juan Bobo Goes to Work. And with that said, I'm going to turn off my camera and mic, and we're going to start the talk. So enjoy, everyone.
All right. Hey, everyone. It's so great to be here. I mean, well, I live here. This is my house, so I'm always here. But it's great to be a part of this, and also to be here with Joe Cepeda, because this dude is just an amazing, amazing illustrator. I mean, to the point where I was blown away by his artwork. And before I even get into like my spiel about this, I have to tell a funny story that I was just thinking about. When Liz Zabla, who is here, I saw her name, she sent me Joe's artwork to get started, like, hey, Doyin, check out this artwork. And I was like, oh my gosh, please don't let it be bad. Don't let it be bad. It took me like an hour to open up the email because I was like, if it's bad, what am I going to say? Like, I don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation. So I opened it, finally had the courage to open the email, and I was just floored by how good, and not good, how amazing Joe's artwork is. And I am just so incredibly thankful that Joe is here to be a part of this talk, but also that he agreed to be a part of this story of my dad. And I can't wait to hear Joe tell his whole story about how he created the artwork. So I'm going to do my part first, and then Joe's going to dig in on his. So real quick, I just want to give you a little bit of background on me. For those of you who have seen the book, hopefully you've read it. And if you haven't, please purchase it from Vroman's, because Vroman's was kind enough to host this event. So we should absolutely support these bookstores like Vroman's, who are doing a great job in hosting these events virtually. There's that. But really the story is wow, it's crazy to think about this. February 3rd, 2019 was the 2-year anniversary of my dad's death. He died of colon cancer. And right around that time, there was a lot of rhetoric going around in America around people immigrating from, I'm not going to say the word, don't worry, I know your kids are here, from poop hole countries. I'll just say that. And I think when my dad passed away, I wanted to make the point of, he was from one of those countries, from Sierra Leone, small West African country, and he got his PhD. He is the smartest dude I've ever come across in my life. And I figured there are so many people like my dad who came here, or want to come here, who have that feeling of, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I won't be accepted when I go to America. And I want to use the story as inspiration for people who come here, like, hey, You're going to doubt me. You don't think I can do this. You don't think I'm able to do this. Then watch me do it. And my pops was the one who told me that and said, hey, there's nothing in the world that you can't do. And when he passed away in 2019, I put pen to paper and created the manuscript. And with Liz Zobla's help, got this thing published. And of course, with Joe Cepeda's help, because the dude is brilliant illustrator. And here we are today. And I want to do a brief reading. Joe, actually, I'm going to ask you, Joe,
Sure.
Would you want to talk about your art stuff before I dig into do the reading? Because I think a lot of people want to see your artwork, including me, because I also have some questions for you. So do you want to do that part first, and then I'll dig into the reading afterwards?
I'll probably show it after. So you can go ahead and read the story, and then we can talk about it, because then I don't know, if people haven't seen the book, then they may, I may be revealing stuff or whatever. So
oh no, that's cool.
Feel free to do that. But I'd like to say that I'm very, very grateful for being here and being invited to talk with everyone. Most of us illustrators really, well, like authors as well, work by ourselves on our own, and we usually don't get a chance to connect that much with readers or all that. And people may not realize that you and I have never met, that this is the first time we've actually exchanged words. And that's the way it traditionally works. So this is all very exciting for me. So I'm happy to talk with you and talk with others about it. But yeah, we'll talk pictures after, and you could read the story. I'm looking forward to hearing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I didn't even mention that because this is the first time Joe and I have spoken words together. So we converse over email, but this is the first time we've actually interacted. So it's crazy how that works.
Right.
And also, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A field, the ask a question field, and when we're done, we'll dig into those.
Sounds good.
Let me share my screen. All right. Here we go.
All right.
Watch Me, Story of Immigration and Inspiration. And again, Joe's artwork, not to be confused with the other Joe in this book, which I'll get to momentarily. Joe grew up in Sierra Leone, a small West African country. He had nice manners, got good grades, and like you, always listened to his parents. Well, maybe not always. Joe had goals and dreams, like you. He knew he had to make a big move in order to achieve them. Joe wanted to go to America. His friends and family said people would laugh at his accent and fear his dark skin. They said he never fit in. He was different, perhaps like you. Joe smiled and said, "Watch me." His friends and family were right. Food in America was strange. Music was new, and perhaps like you, he enjoyed it. But Joe still missed Sierra Leone. In America, some people teased Joe about his accent and dark skin. Some people told him to go back to Africa. There's the beautiful plane. It hurt Joe to be hated for things he couldn't control, just like it hurts you. Maybe going back to Africa was a safe and easy thing to do. But Joe's dreams didn't hang out with safe and easy. To those who doubted he could make it in America, he said, "Watch me." Look around. Do you see people like Joe? Do you watch them learn and study surrounded by books? Do you watch them as they deal with all kinds of looks? Do you watch them throw an awesome curveball? Do you watch them eat lunch by themselves down the hall? They come by plane, perhaps like you. They come by boat, maybe you did too. Watch them, see them, This land is your land. This land is our land. There's enough for everyone. Sorry, side note, this is my favorite panel of the book. I love this, and I want to blow this up and put this on my wall. I think it's beautiful. Continuing on. But what about Joe? Joe studied, and perhaps like you, he studied hard. He knew he had to work twice as hard at school to prove that he actually belonged there. Many of his teachers and classmates thought he wouldn't graduate. Watch me, Joe said. And at the end of his school years, he was Dr. Joe. And how do I know? Because Dr. Joe was my dad. I think I'm the one on the right, maybe the one on the left. I don't know. Right now, a kid is dreaming of coming to America to become the next Dr. Joe. You don't think she can do it? Watch me, she says and smiles. The end.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, it was such, I get chills reading it, even when I get to the page where, especially when I get to the page where it's like, how do I know? Because Dr. Joe is my dad. I'm like, I still get chills, and I'm like, I'm a grown man. I know how the story ends, but I still, it still impacts me. And I am so glad that my dad had that resilience to stay here when going back home would have been the easy thing. Because if he went back home, I wouldn't be here. I sure wouldn't be an author, most likely. I don't know where I would be. So I'm thankful that he came here and he got his degree, his PhD, and became Dr. Joe. And one point I wanted to make about the book real quick is, so in the spread, Dr. Joe he looks like a medical doctor. And technically he is a doctor, but sorry, I just noticed my twin brother's here. Oh, so that's great. Hi, Shola. So in the book, it shows Dr. Joe as a medical doctor. He was not a medical doctor. That's okay. But he still got his doctorate. He was, a PhD from Northwestern, one of the best universities in the world. So we thought it would be, yes, absolutely, Liz. And we thought it would be better and easier for kids to understand that kind of a doctor than a professorial doctor. So that's the reason why we went with that. So we try to make it as relatable as possible to the kiddos. So that was one of the things that Liz and I worked with. And I see you out there, Liz, with your artistic license. I see you winking at me. So Joe,
sure.
Joe, artist Joe, not Dr. Joe, illustrator Joe, tell us some more about your process, because I'm fascinated by, and actually, before you get to that, let me ask you a couple questions, cool?
This is pretty free form. I'm good with this.
Yeah, so I think when Liz reached out, by the way, when I keep referring to Liz Zabla is the amazing lead editor at Firewall and Friends. She is brilliant. She is a mentor and a friend to me, and I love her very, very much, and she's helped with my career tremendously. So Liz, just much love to you. So whenever I refer to Liz, that's who I'm talking about. So when Liz and I were talking about this book, Liz had some ideas of people who would be great illustrators, and then Joe's name came right up to the forefront. And the question I had for Joe is, that my dad is from Sierra Leone, and what was the research process like to create the characters and the artwork and the colors? I mean, there's so many ways you could have gotten this wrong. and you didn't. Like you were on a tightrope the whole way, and you crushed it. So I just want to know how you went about that.
Yeah, you know, some manuscripts that I get are not rooted in any kind of specificity, and some are. Yours was, and so I asked Liz and her team to help me with some of that research, visual research. Like I think I asked if there were pictures of Sierra Leone in the 60s, you know, stuff like that. And I use it to a degree because I don't want to be inaccurate. I never want to be, you know, I want to be honest and have as much integrity to the accuracy of the story as possible. However, the tightrope is in making a story somewhat universal so that it's applicable over time and space, visually and all that. So I don't like being really attached to very specific things. Like I think I did ask where your dad went to college, where he kind of settled. And so in some of the pictures, and I guess I'll talk about this in a second, I sort of give indications of those things. I think I asked where you grew up. I think it was back east somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of thought about that, but to me, this is the way I look at it. If we go that far to that decision process where we want to be really accurate, then why are we using illustrations? We might as well use photographs and make it that kind of book. So the reason an illustrator like me exists and whatever is for our editorial perspective on it. I try and tell the story as well once I have your manuscript, and then there are those choices where I'm trying to be broad in a sense or universal and trying to honor your dad's story. I got scared for a second when you started to say, when you said that your dad was not a medical doctor, because I thought, did I miss that completely or entirely?
No.
It seems like you and Liz that made that decision. So
no. Yeah, now that everyone has this book and that it's out there, let me tell you all my gripes on the editorial process right now, Joe. No, it's not that. It's Liz and I were talking about that, and we want to make this because kids are smart, but right. I mean, those things that I know when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and you saw a dude who in a collared shirt sitting at a podium, and he's teaching classes because he was a professor. Like maybe he's a doctor. Like weird. Like the last time I went to the doctor, you know, they took my blood pressure with that blood pressure thing. Like that's they need to understand. Like that's what it looks like. I mean, and quite frankly, my dad worked probably as hard, if not more, even harder than a lot of medical doctors in this world. Just the fact that he had to deal with untold, amounts of racism coming here. And
undoubtedly.
Yeah.
I think
go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, it's a perfectly great and fine editorial choice you guys made in the beginning, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't miss it.
You did not drop the ball. You did not. That was perfect. That's exactly what we wanted.
Good.
One other question that I had for you about the whole art process is like when do you have like, this is not really about Watch Me, it's just about how you create art. So do you have like different versions of art? So there's like whatever this version of art is called, and then maybe you have like a more cartoony version of art or something. Like, do you have like different like styles of art that you do for some of your books or just in general?
Yeah, actually, and that's actually when I speak at conferences or to other illustrators, the question of style is actually a very a big discussion or whatever. But you know, and I won't go into it that much. But yeah, in a sense, my view on it is that and most of us in this business would agree, story is king. We live in Southern California, and you know, the movie industry and all that. You know, a lot of people again, you and I have never met, and people tend to ask, do I work, ask illustrators this question a lot, is do I work with the author when I'm working? And the question, or the answer to that question is no, and there's kind of a reason for that. But basically, the collaboration is not necessarily with you, Dwayne, it's with the story. That's what I'm collaborating with. And the story is the third party. The story is the thing that has to go out in the world, and we all kind of surrender to it if we're doing our job. And my job is not the way I always view this. And I think early in my career as an illustrator, of course, like most illustrators, you think about style a lot because you're trying to get hired for work. And that's sort of the thing that you hope is the impression that you leave with a lot of people, and they remember that. But I think it's also can be kind of a crutch or whatever. Or what I have found is that I don't like to impose a style onto a story. I'd rather the story tell me what it wants. And I think I'm lucky in that I wasn't always attached to style from the beginning. I like variety. I like working in different ways. So one of the first things I'm looking for or feeling right away is what style or what way of telling the story feels right, and if I'm able to do it. And this is probably a good time for me to segue into.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm gonna figure out how to, or I'm gonna share my screen and select window or screen. So I am going to go to that, and hopefully, okay. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Yes.
Do you guys see my screen there?
Yep, we do.
Okay, well, actually, I'm going to go back up to here. All right, so there's the cover. But this image was sort of, if I think I'm going to do something particularly different than maybe what someone has seen before or recent books, I have many times decided I wanted to take one of the images that I already feel pretty good about and do a painting right off the bat and share that. And I think I did this with Liz. And I don't know if you saw, did you see this right off the bat?
I did, okay. Joe. And that was the first photo I believe I saw of yours.
Right.
Yeah. So Liz, that's also one of my favorites too. Like, this is just so gorgeous.
Yeah. And
so good.
I'm sorry. So when I did this, I was able to do it because I had the image right away. And then it was mostly of sort of having a feeling and letting a couple of things I knew right away. This was going to be a painterly book. It was, I knew that I wanted texture, richness, and that has to do with thinking about Sierra Leone, thinking about the colors, thinking about cultural difference and vibrancy and all that. So that was one of the things I knew right away, that this was going to be a painterly book. And then I just started painting, and things just kind of happened. For example, the clouds in this book and the sky became a character. And if you follow this book all the way through, there's sort of like a lyrical strand that goes through the book, and for me, helps tell the story. There are times when the skies are sort of enveloping. There's I'll show in a little bit when the clouds help move your eyes to something and a sort of tension. And then the birds became the other character. If you look in this story, the birds follow Joe from Africa all the way to his house. And there's even birds on the roof of the house that I put, which represented your family in the last scene, I think. So they started to, very early on, I had this device, which I'm careful for it not to be like a gimmick, but that I wanted to be more poetry than anything else. And there's a question I ask right away when I read a manuscript. This is your manuscript. I don't know if you can see it real well, but when I got it, this is like the middle of the book. One of the things I do when I read a manuscript, I ask this question to myself: how much is this book rooted in gravity? It's just a thing I have for myself, which tells me, is this book really plot-based, or is it poetic, or whatever? And that kind of tells me whether the shapes are going to be abstract, whether I'm going to use color, whether, if it's plot-based and it goes from A to B, how much do I need to move the story, like in terms of cinema and storytelling, or can I be more robust in the way the pictures move, are on the page? So when I was reading your manuscript, the funny thing about, well, it's not funny, but some stories I just see pictures right away. And you can see the little thumbnails that I doodled almost at first read. I just saw pictures to your book right away, to your story. And so it was very easy to get to some of these things, like the picture I just showed you. And then, of course, most illustrators will recognize that we work, I moved into thumbnails, and this is the picture, when people are talking about Joe, it'll be hard in America and such. So they're very simple shapes, and I can start telling the story. I start making notes to myself. And then, the thumbnails become a little bit more articulated sketches. And at this point, this is where myself and an art director and an editor can really go through the story, and where they would have said, Joe, he's not a medical doctor, he's a professor. So this is where they would have caught that if that would have happened, or if that would have been the case. So mostly I try and get things figured out. But one of the things that happened in this story is on page 10 and 11. You can see in the upper right. I included, well, actually, if I'm going to go back for a second, you see 10 and 11 is the plane, but you can see my old initial drawing, which was 12 and 13, which is Joe, in a city street. But I realized that the picture that was missing for me was what everyone must face when they come from far away, is the journey. And a lot of times you are alone on that journey. My mom came from Mexico, my dad from Texas. We're a country of immigrants, and there is always a journey, and sometimes you must feel alone. So I wanted to show Joe on the plane or in the middle of this big sky as a sort of contemplative piece that didn't need words, that everyone can kind of sit with and think about what it's like to go from one place to another. And of course, the birds still continue to follow or whatever. And then, like I said, so I included that and moved the story along, and we were able to work it out mechanically so that it all fit in 32 pages. And then, of course, I started painting. Here again, like I say, the clouds for me are having this sort of, are a character themselves. Initially, I saw this picture as silhouettes. I saw the people as silhouettes and only their smiles. But it was hard to get away from the color and of Sierra Leone and all of that. So I wanted to paint their dresses, their clothing and all that. And that's kind of what happened here. This is the plane picture that I told you about. It's one of my favorites. Not sure why, but it is. It's painterly. The clouds are taking the plane, and they're also, I don't know.
The birds are there.
Yeah, the birds are there.
I didn't even know that about the birds.
The birds are a character in this story. They you know what they are? I've heard this said, everyone wants someone to be bearing witness to their life. And I think about that a lot. In telling the story, we're telling it, and in some sense we are a witness. But the birds ended up being that device for me. In this scene, which I saw right away too, of what it's like. Many of us know what it's like to feel isolated, to feel pointed at, to feel different. The clouds, or the scumbled sort of clouds that kind of lead to the people on the right and Joe himself, are kind of creating that tension. They're not together, they're separate, but they're highlighting that. And actually the streetlights kind of do that too. They're kind of pointing at each other, and everyone's pointing at each other, and they're looking at each other, and because it's difficult. I wanted this thing to have tension. I wanted to be one side on the other and another side on the other, because, well, we know what that feels like, especially these days. So this scene was one of my favorites because years ago, an editor, when I first got started, offered me a project, and I said no, and I regret it so much. I just was kind of busy. I didn't fit. But he offered me to illustrate a story about Roberto Clemente, the great Pittsburgh Pirate baseball player.
Yep.
And I never got to do that baseball book. So when I read that line, I knew, oh, great, I get to draw a baseball picture. I don't know, it's one of my favorites. So, and let's see, I'll just kind of finish off kind of quickly. So here, of course, this is one of my favorite spreads in the book. This is us. This is who we all are. I saw this picture kind of right away. And I kind of went right off of your words on this one. We come by plane, we come by train. And I wanted to show somewhat that scene, but it's our everyday scene where we are part of the community, moving through a community that may not have been ours initially, but is ours now, and doing everything we need to do. I tried to get, without being, silly about it or whatever, but trying to get as many different people that we live with in this picture as I could. It's also, the perspective is actually wrong and inaccurate, but this is poetic license on my, the vanishing points on this picture. If you were being, subscribing to accurate 1-point perspective, this picture would be inaccurate, but it's part of staging. It's my poetic license. It's the way you make a picture work. And the clouds, of course, here are replicating sort of the movement of people from one place to another.
Hey, Joe, real
yeah, sure.
Go back real quick.
Sure.
So
to which picture?
No, you're good right there.
Okay.
So I'm noticing that the dude in the green shirt kind of looks like the dad of the family when I reveal that Dr. Joe is my.
Oh.
I was wondering, is that the same dude?
No, it's probably coincidental. That one's probably.
Okay. I'm trying to get all this third wall stuff.
But you mentioned earlier that one of your favorite pictures was the one. There's enough room for all of us, I think, with the park, and then there's a guy selling ice cream, a paletero. That's what we call him in my neighborhood. I knew I knew the paletero was going to be in that scene right away because I don't know why, but a sunny day, people buying ice cream and whatever. But on the bottom left of that picture is my family, is me and my wife and my son, kind of snuck in there reading the map or whatever. So
get to that. Show that. I got to see that.
Okay, let's see. I'll have to go way down here. I'm not going to go through all these slides, but because I know. Oh, okay, here we go. So on the bottom left, that's my son at a younger age. Me without gray hair at a younger age. Or that's the three of us there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So. Anyways, I won't go much longer, but I'll just talk about the jacket a little bit. So jackets are always interesting. They can be a lot of fun and they can be perplexing because there's a whole sales aspect to a jacket, right? And so I had several ideas, but I have to really give credit to Liz, and I'm drawing a blank. I'm so sorry. The art director, what's his name? My apologies. But
Rich,
they kind of really,
art director.
I'll let Liz kind of type that up for us. Rich, of course, Rich. So they really kind of saw these sketches And we love the picture that, was reflective of that initial picture, the one on the bottom right there. And then I think the one on the top left, the motion of that to a degree, but it wasn't quite enough. So they had the idea of, how about Joe, like, being more dynamic, running from one side to the other, from one place to the other. And so that's why, based on their suggestions, we came up with this design. And of course, the birds are there again. And that's how we did the jacket. And that's what the jacket came to be. But I'm going to stop right there because I probably talked longer than I should, and we could probably have some room for questions.
No, this is good. Yeah, this is fantastic, Joe.
No problem.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to get to some of the questions because I know there are some that have popped up. Okay, hold on. Where did the questions go? I saw them a second ago. Now they're hiding from me. All right, 1 second. I did see them. Oh, here we go. Here we are. I got them. Okay. So the first one is, I'm looking forward to the story and talk. Based on the subject of the book, I wonder, aside from your clear persistence and resilience, what other protective factors were at play in your story? In other words, can you tell us about the people that were helping hands in your journey? What did they do that was helpful? Oh, that's a great question. So for this particular, each one of my Fywell and Friends books, so 2 of them are over my right shoulder, I Wonder, and What's the Difference? They all had different inspirations. And really this one, Watch Me, of course, like the people really inspirational was my dad. But he wasn't around, sadly, when I wrote this. He passed away like a month before I wrote this. So the one person who really helped me, hopefully he's still here, is my twin brother, Shola. The dude has been a rock for me in so many ways, emotionally, just as a friend, just as a brother, just to help me through. People say that 2020 was a horrible year. 2019 was way worse for me. Way worse, because my dad died. There's other stuff that happened. I was targeted by some white supremacists early in the year. Not to get on a tangent, but I should bring this up. Someone, they called my cell phone. I had no idea how they got my number, but they called me and said, hey, N-word, if you don't shut up, we're going to make you shut up ourselves. And this is right before I'm taking my kids to school. I'll never forget this. It was a Tuesday morning. This was like 2 weeks after my dad passed away. So I'm like, great. So my dad passed away. Now I have to deal with these white supremacists who have my phone number and harassing me. It was a really rough year. But to that point, to get back to the question, really, Shola, who is here, he says, nah, fam, the success is all you. But it was a team effort. So he really was there to talk to. He was always there to listen. And most importantly, he was like, he would tell me the stuff I didn't want to hear sometimes, but he was also my biggest cheerleader. So much respect to him in that. So the next question is I'd love to hear about how the 2 of you collaborated to create the artwork. And so one thing, I'll say something, Joe, and then you can piggyback on this. Joe also made the point during his presentation that he and I did not talk during this process. We used Liz as kind of like the intermediary. She was the person, like the go-between. But there was a lot. Joe did send like a questionnaire, like a bunch of questions for me to answer, around that. Like, when did he come to America? You know, tell me some stuff about Sierra Leone. Where did he go to school? All of these things, so you could get that aspect in there. And Joe, feel free to add to whatever you need to on that.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Like I said, the manuscript will tell me how much of that I need to do. And since this was a story based on your dad, and I wanted to honor that and the specifics of some of like his history, and that's typical how you would do something like this, is go through an editor, because you run a risk of talking directly with an author before coming up with your images and stuff, because, well, an author can't help but have certain thoughts about how they want their book illustrated, and that isn't always the healthiest thing for an illustrator to have, because you want to work and ideate from an original place as much as possible. And you already have the words, you already have the manuscript. And again, like I said before, that's what really the collaboration is. So yeah, I did ask those questions because they were key to some of the picture making. And then really, once you have those facts or those things, you have to kind of decide how much of that you're going to employ, how much of that is pertinent, and how much of it you want to skew in an honorable yet poetic or visual way.
No, that's fantastic answer. Thank you, Joe, for that. Another question is, Doyin, have you read the book to your kids? And did they already know about their grandfather's journey to America? So, yes, I have. That's something that I definitely, I have. They're my litmus test for everything. So I have to make sure that they dig it. But I think one thing about it is that I read the manuscript from a Word document to them. So without pictures, without illustrations. So they still were like, this is cool, but like, where are the illustrations, man? Like, what's happening here? And I said, oh, it's coming. So then as soon as I got the artwork from Liz and from Joe, and that beautiful spread of my dad kind of looking out off the cliff and looking and seeing all of the birds flying, then they're like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. It's so cool. They loved it.
Right.
And they didn't know how much. And then one of the questions is like, did they know a lot of his journey when he came to America? And not so much. My kids are 10 and 7. So my 10-year-old has a pretty healthy understanding of like what race and racism is about. My 7-year-old is still kind of just navigating around, like playing Roblox and doing other stuff that 7-year-olds do.
Right.
But I try to keep it to the point where I don't want to inundate them with like all of the ills that society is going to put on them, as not only a double whammy of being women and being women of color eventually, you know, when they grow up to be women. It's scary out there. So I didn't tell them the entire story of the racism, but once we read the book together, when we got it and showed that picture of the guy yelling at my dad, my 10-year-old's like, what is that why is he yelling at him? And then that's when we had a little bit of a talk and got deep into it. And she's just like, oh man, Grandpa's so sweet. He's so nice. Why would anyone not like him? And yeah.
Wow.
To the world of racism.
That's the power of books right there, and images, I think. You know, if you'll allow me to jump a little bit on that question. One thing I many times forget to do is to actually read aloud a story when I first see the manuscript. So like your kids were looking at the manuscript without pictures, that I kind of do the same things. I see a manuscript, I read it like yours, and I have images that go, and that's many times, usually enough for me to start storytelling, but I sometimes have to tell myself to read the story aloud, to hear how the words sound and sing or whatever, just to give me more of the storytelling than just the words on the page that I'm reading, because that's the great magic of a picture book. It's words and pictures working together. So I have to remind myself to do something, or something akin to what you're just talking about.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Alexis had a question that I wanted to
Sure.
answer. She said, did each of you have a specific reader in mind as you created this work? So for me personally, that specific reader was a kid. Well, there's actually two. So there's one domestically and there's one abroad. So the abroad kid is someone who potentially wanted to come to America, felt like, oh gosh, they're not going to accept me, just like my dad dealt with, and still went for it anyway and said, you know what, I can do this. I have every skill set in the world to be successful. The domestic kid, the one here in America, it was someone who has been doubted for whatever the case may be. Maybe they're told they're not smart enough, they're not good looking enough, or maybe they're overweight, or whatever the issue is, and people are making fun of them and say, you can't do this, people like you can't do this. And it was just the whole thing of watch me. And real quick is when I got my first book, not through Fywell and Friends, it's my other publisher, which I long left. I went to try to get a book deal or try to get a literary agent. And it took me so many tries before. And one dude, I will never forget this dude. I went into his office in New York and he was like, hey, listen, man, no offense, but nobody wants to read a book about fatherhood from a black man.
Wow.
And I was just like, wow. So, and I remember walking out of there and I was like, thinking like, oh, if you don't think I can do it, well, watch me. And of course I did it. Right. But it's for those people, those kids out there who feel like they can't. Oh, by the way, I sent him a copy. I sent him a copy. I put I paid the shipping and handling for that. It was the best, like $3.60 I've spent in my lifetime. But really, it just comes down to people who feel like they're doubted. And Joe, I'll let you say your part on that.
Well, here's a funny thing. Since it's different, I suppose, when I write something, and I'm doing more of that now. But taking most of my career, I've illustrated other people's manuscripts. So it's already kind of a written story when I get to it. So I am putting myself firstly in the position of a reader as well, and then I go to storytelling. Once I start realizing I'm adopting this story that is now this baby that's come in my door, and now I'm going to help raise it, and however I do the best thing, and we're going to send it out to the world and hope that it becomes this beautiful thing that everyone will enjoy. When I first started, I really wasn't aiming at children's books, so I don't have a lot of knowledge of the history of children's books as much as maybe some other people who were aiming for it. I started out illustrating editorial work, magazines, and all that. So when I get a manuscript that's a children's book, I don't really think about an audience very much. I just try and respond to the manuscript. The manuscript is already written for kids or written for somebody, and I think what I'm trying to do is just to respond as honestly as I can to that. And I always say this about children's books, that for me, illustrating a children's book is largely the celebration of three simple things: color, shape, and people. And animals are just fuzzy people. So when I illustrate a children's book, I like to say paint with my feet on the ground. I try not to overthink it. I try not to, the script is already there. I am just, if the pictures entertain me, then they should entertain an audience. And if I'm not trying to intellectualize the process, I'm probably in a good place. And I'm just hopeful that people will enjoy the story when it leaves my door. And here, the other thing about this is it's funny because when I don't, maybe people don't know this. And same for you, Doyin. You don't really see this project that you started longer than even I was involved in it. And it's about a year later when I actually see the book, and I sneak up opening that first page and stuff, because my experience with it was in the studio painting and drawing it, and I have that moment in time. And a year later, when I see the book, I don't have the same ownership that I did before. I have now. It's not really mine as much. It's out. It's something else. It belongs to the reader as much as it belongs to me. So because I look at pictures and I think, oh, I could have painted that better, or I could have done that, or whatever. But it doesn't matter so much anymore. It's really what the experience other people are having now.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent point. And I know we have time for one more question. So
Okay.
Caitlin asked, Doyin, do you have any future goals or hopes for the book? So real quick, yeah, that's a great question. Really, what my goals are for the book is I want this book to be in every library. I want it to be in every elementary school. And one thing that I am really focusing in now, really I focused in on it towards the end of 2020, but now really hammering in, is as an anti-racism facilitator. So I do anti-racism facilitation. I am the guy who created the Anti-Racism Fight Club. And really what it is like a place where people can, whether it's corporations, school districts, anyone like that, can really learn how to be anti-racist in a way that will empower their students, their faculty, their employees, and what have you. So really to that point is when it comes to kiddos, is that I want to go to schools. I want to talk about this book. I want to talk about my dad's stories, and also deliver anti-racism workshops to kids all over the country so they can grow up to be truly anti-racist. Because quite frankly, adults have failed miserably when it's come to fighting against racism. Like, I mean, just look around. Like, we've failed miserably. So it comes down to the kids. The kids are going to get us out of this mess. So I am going to use my superpowers as an anti-racism facilitator to help kids. And really the goal is to get more kids in more schools involved in this anti-racism mission. And Joe, there's one question for you too.
Sure.
It says, the art in Watch Me has such beautiful texture. Are you more of a traditional painter, or do you use digital tools?
I use both. Most of my career I spent working traditionally, oil paint, but now I work digitally as well. As a matter of fact, I'm working on a book right now that I'm delivering digitally. I don't try and I'm still new at that, so I try and paint digitally within a comfortable level. But so again, if the story feels like it needs to be told that way, that's the way I'll go, like I did with this book that I'm working on. I'll kind of want to jump on what you just said, Doyin, or Doyin. See now?
Yeah, Doyin, you got it. It's all good.
So I've thought about that lately. For the longest time, I've been working on books and all, telling stories and all that. But I guess when I speak at schools and I have that opportunity, one of the hopes that I have, if I can, is that young people will get to understand that their story is worth telling. Everybody's story is worth telling. It doesn't matter whether you live in modest or difficult conditions, or whether you live in resplendent ones. It's the challenge of telling it with beauty and grace and insight and all of that. So if more young people feel empowered and have the access and have no fear in telling their story, I think we'll all be better off, because that will help us in understanding each other, I guess. So that's the part I guess I'd want to play in it all.
That's awesome. And that's it.
Yeah, I think that was a great talk, great presentation, and just lovely. Like everyone in the chat, like it was so much fun seeing all of your comments. For those of you who tuned in late, don't worry, the replay will be available shortly. It should be up within half an hour, so you can check that out. And you can also pass on the link to anybody who was unable to make it today. Again, if you would like to purchase a copy of the book, just click on the green purchase button directly below the screen. And I think that about covers it. Stay safe, everyone, and have a good weekend. Right.
Thank
Bye,
you
everyone.
so much. See you later.
Thank you, Doyin.